Hey listen people and peopleettes, humans of all ages. Before we get into today's video, let's talk about today's sponsor. Joking, it's a
Spoiler warning.
lot of in-game stuff, like all the way to the end, you know, like this isn't one of those like, oh, I've played 90% of the game, I'm probably good now. Like, if you don't want to be spoiled for anything, here's your warning. So if you played Tears of the Kingdom all the way through and get the true ending of the game, you see that Minoru kind of drifts off into the spirit world or something. But that left me wondering, who could be the next Sage of Spirit? Now, I'm not so sure that the Sage of Spirit spot needs to be filled since Ganondorf is gone. Maybe that's not needed. Maybe a Sage doesn't awaken unless it's needed. But I do like thinking about things that are completely unnecessary for me to think about. So, we're going to talk today about who I think could be the Sage of Spirit. To be honest, I thought that if we got some DLC, maybe this would be one of the things that we actually fulfilled was the next Sage of Spirit, but I guess that's not happening. It can be our own headcanon DLC that we create. But I have 3 people that I think could be candidates for the Sage of Spirit. We're going to talk about reasons why I think they could become the Sage of Spirit and reasons why I don't really think they would. And then at the end, I suppose I'll give my pick for who I think it will be. But anyways, let's get into it. So the first person, you know her, you love her, everyone does, Pura. I think there's several reasons why Pura could be the Sage of Spirit. One, she's Sheikah, and there does seem to be some kind of connection between the Zonai and the Sheikah. A lot of parallel things, especially from game to game. You know, the Sheikah were really represented in Breath of the Wild, the Zonai in Tears of the Kingdom. The Zonai have the third eye, the Sheikah have an eye as their symbol. You have the Sheikah with their technology making the Guardians, and you have the Zonai with their magic, and they have the constructs. There's just a lot of parallels between them, and of course you know that there's no Zonai, at least that we know of, in present-day Hyrule. So if there's no Zonai, we can't follow the same kind of rule that, you know, fire sages do with it's been a Goron both times, it's been a Rito with the wind, Zora with water, Gerudo with electricity. So who in Hyrule do I think would be the most like the Zonai? Probably the Sheikah. So the connection between those two races alone makes me think that a Sheikah could be a good choice for the Sage of Spirit. But not only is Pura a Sheikah, she's also the leader of Lookout Landing. She's a leading authority and figure in the land of Hyrule, and actually the highest authority in technology. So she's already kind of established herself as a figure in Hyrule. She also knows a lot about the goings-on in Hyrule. She's actually the person who gives Link one of his first main story quests in going and checking out the different villages in Hyrule to see what in the world's going on with all the Zelda reports. So girl knows what's going on even though she's in Central Hyrule and miles away from any of these other locations. Plus, she's like 100+ years old, so like, you gotta gain a lot of wisdom in that amount of time. But because she's already this authority figure in Hyrule, I think that kind of bumps her up as well in this race to be the next Sage of Spirit. And lastly, the thing that I think Pura has going for her is she's kinda got plot armor. At the end of the game, the credits roll, and you see all of the sages present, and the only people who aren't sages are Link and Pura. And so she's already kind of in the loop. She's already kind of part of the gang, so I think making her the Sage of Spirit kind of makes sense because plot armor, if you will. However, I do think there's reasons that hurt Pura's chances as well. First of all, I do think that Pura isn't that spiritual of a character in herself. I mean, she's actually who I think is the least spiritual person on the list of 3 people that I have here. She's very scientific. Now, of course, she believes in magic. I mean, when you have spiraling green things coming out of shrines that just appeared, I think that you would kind of believe in something beyond just science. But she's more involved with the scientific and studying side of things than she is anything that's really spiritual. Additionally, and this kind of goes with seeing her at the end of the credits that I used to be in her favor, but maybe this works against her. I feel like her character is very established. Like I said earlier, she's over 100 years old, and how much more can a 100-year-old person do? You know, so maybe her character is established, and to be honest, she does feel like she's kind of complete. And one last thing that I'm not sure really matters, but she's not the leader or necessarily a representative of a tribe. She is Sheikah, but she lives in Lookout Landing, which is actually this kind of cool place where all different people of different tribes come together. It seems like the sages often represent one of the people groups, and she doesn't really represent a specific people group, I guess is what I'm saying. So Pura is one candidate, but she has some competition. One of those being everyone's favorite poop collector, Hestu. Everyone loves him. He's this quirky little dude with his little maracas. But why do I think he would be a good candidate for the Sage of Spirit? Well, for one reason, he could represent the Koroks. Most of the time, the sages aren't comprised of anyone of the same race. each different sage represents a different people group. Now, of course, the Zonai in the past had Minoru and Rauru, but for the most part, it seems to be that there's only one representation of a race in the group of sages. One group that isn't represented is the Koroks, and they actually seem to be a fairly large portion of Hyrule. In fact, if you can find 1,000 Korok seeds, each from a different Korok, I would venture to say that there's more Koroks than any other race in Hyrule. But I think that he could represent the Koroks as the Sage's spirit. In fact, I think the Koroks are the most unrepresented group of people in all of Hyrule, and they have the most people. So for representation purposes, I think Hestu's a good candidate, but also Hestu makes a great person for it because he seems somewhat spiritual. I mean, only certain people can see him, seems spiritual to me, and the Lost Woods has always been a very mystical and kind of spiritual place in the Zelda verse. I mean, bro needs to do something besides collecting poop and shaking his maracas. We'll find another way to expand that inventory. But Hestu does have a couple of hurdles. One, he's a little cowardly. I mean, that doesn't necessarily count anybody out, as we've seen in lots of media. Cowards are part of big teams all the time. But I do feel like it hurts his chances somewhat. However, the things that I think hurt him more than that are, I don't think he's very knowledgeable of the goings-on in Hyrule. I mean, he does get around a little bit, but I don't think that he knows as much going on in the world of Hyrule as much as other characters do. I think that the Koroks seem to be very focused on keeping the Deku Tree safe and kind of keeping the sanctity of the Lost Woods. So outside of that little world of theirs, I don't really feel like they worry so much about what's going on in the rest of Hyrule. And also, dude is a little irresponsible. We collected 900 Korok seeds for him last time around, okay? And he lost all of them. Beginning of Tears of the Kingdom, nothing. Not a dang seed to shake. And we had to collect another bunch of poop for him. I mean, it's kind of irresponsible, my guy. Just saying. And last, but certainly not least, we have actually another Sheikah, Paya. The girl who, in the last game, kind of lost it every time Link looked at her. And in this game is now the leader of the Sheikah tribe, which is one of the pros for Paya. She isn't just a Sheikah, but she's also the leader of the Sheikah. She's a representative of the Sheikah, and kind of like we talked about with Hestu with representation, like she would represent the Sheikah race as a whole. And like I said about her great aunt Pura, the Sheikah and the Zonai seem to be very similar to each other. Big difference between Paya and Pura with that specifically. Pura is more into the technology side of things, but I would venture to say that Paya is a little bit more spiritual than her great aunt. One more reason in Paya's favor is I really still feel like I don't know enough about her. I mean, we've seen the transformation from Breath of the Wild to Tears of the Kingdom, but I feel like there's more to her character that we just haven't got to see yet. But I think similar to Hestu, one of the things that would hold Paya back from being the Sage's Spirit is the fact that she's cowardly, and I think even more so than Hestu. I don't think that omits her, once again, same thing as Hestu, but I think it kind of lessens the chances. And to be honest with Yunobo, we've kind of already got a coward in the Sage group. But also, I think another reason Paya maybe isn't the right fit for this is she's really new to the leader thing. She's learning how to be the leader of the Sheikah. Of course, Sidon has just become the king of the Zora, but I think Sidon has been preparing for a long time, and Sidon is a little over 100 years old when Paya is still like in her early 20s. And though Zora age slower, it doesn't seem like their knowledge level is any slower. Like Sidon is similar to like a 20-year-old Hylian, but I don't think his mentality is exactly the same as a 20-year-old Hylian, if that makes any sense. I do think that Paya was going to be the chief one way or the other, the same as Sidon was going to be king, which that can be a topic for a different video, but I think it was thrown on her pretty quick. And I don't even know if she knew that she was going to be, but I think there were hints to the fact that she would be the new chief. Now, after sitting on it and collecting all these reasons why I think these three should be or shouldn't be or would be or wouldn't be the new Sage's Spirit, I've come to a conclusion, although I think everyone has a pretty fair chance. I personally think that it's Paya. And I actually had a really hard time like figuring out which one I thought it was, because I genuinely think they're all like really close to each other. I'll kind of like make a representation here on the video of how close I think they are. But I think that Pura wouldn't get it just simply because, like I said earlier, and I think this is the part that hurts her probably the most, I feel like her role is established. So that leaves you with Paya and Hestu. Each one represents a separate people group, and neither one of those people groups is represented amongst the sages. So it's kind of 50-50 when it comes to that. I think when looking at Hestu, the Koroks are the most underrepresented group in all of Hyrule, still with that crazy population. But when it comes to whose character I think is really underdeveloped, but also has the most potential, it's Paya. She's around the age of all the other sages, which, I mean, technically Zelda and Link are 122 or something. But she's around the age of the rest of the sages. She is a new leader, and though you don't have to be a leader to be a sage, it does seem that it doesn't hurt your chances. But I think her character has the most potential for this role, and I think would be the most likely out of these three to be picked, but not by much. But let me know what you guys think down in the comments below. Who do you think would be a good next Sage of Spirit? It doesn't have to be any of these three. It can be anybody that you can think of. I mean, put them in the game. You know, it doesn't need to be like Cloud Strife. And hit the snot out of that freaking subscribe button. But also, if you don't know what the most underrated Zelda game is, I think I might. Check it out right here. Peace. See y'all next time.